What happens when Africa's strategy doesn't just resist Europe, but destroys a European kingdom? Imagine three kings on a single field of battle. Three crowns stretched across religion, empire, and revenge. One field, one river. One day that would shatter an empire's dream and redraw the map of Europe. This is the story of Alcácer Quibir, the day Morocco broke Portugal and forced Europe to look at Africa as more than a coastline to be taken.
August 4th, 1578. A battle named after a river, remembered by a continent. Not a footnote, a turning point.
Portugal, the small Atlantic kingdom that once led the world's voyages, had a new dream: crusade and conquest across the Strait of Gibraltar. Its young king, Sebastian Zealous, idealistic, raised in Jesuit fervor, saw Morocco not as neighbor, but as a stage for glory and holy war. He sailed with banners and priests, believing God would bless a Christian march on African soil. Morocco was no disorganized target. The Saudi dynasty had turned a fractious land into a power. The throne had been contested. A deposed sultan named Abu Abdallah sought Portuguese backing to regain power. Facing him stood Abd al-Malik, a Saadi who had learned the art of war and diplomacy in exile, who now rallied his countrymen for a fight for Morocco's honor and survival. This was not a clash between civilization and savagery. It was a collision of ambition and strategy. European crusading zeal meeting African political calculation. King Sebastian, barely 30, drove his nobles with a dream of a heroic crusade. He gathered an army of knights, mercenaries, cannons, and with him came foreign adventurers and exiles who smelled prophet and legend. Opposing them, Abd al-Malik, a man who had survived exile, returned with Ottoman contacts and bound together soldiers who had a personal score to settle. Moors driven from Spain, warriors whose homes had been lost in the Reconquista. They carried memory as a weapon. And between them, Abu Abdallah, the deposed claimant, who would throw his fortunes in with the Portuguese and set the three crowns on the same field. Sebastian's fleet sailed in late June. They landed at Arzila. There Abu Abdallah joined the Christians. They march inland, confident, a small allied force with better steel and faith versus a Moroccan realm that seemed divided. But Abd al-Malik had not come to be defeated. He had gathered horsemen and foot soldiers, veterans of North Africa and Andalusia, men who fought with a blend of cavalry mobility and gunpowder. He prepared a field not for a slugging match, but for encirclement. More than that, Abd al-Malik was ill. He understood the fragility of kingship. He also understood how morale moves armies. And so, in the weeks before the clash, he kept secrets and shaped the map of the battlefield to his advantage. Here is the heart of the reversal. The Portuguese relied on disciplined infantry and heavy pike and charge tradition, a European template. Abd al-Malik exploited terrain, timing, and composition. He massed cavalry on the wings, poised to fold in like a pair of great horns. He placed seasoned Andalusian infantry in the center, men driven by loss and hatred of the Reconquista. He timed artillery and musket volleys to soften and disrupt, then unleashed cavalry to unhinge flanks. Portugal's long supply lines and lack of desert experience left them brittle. Their valor was unquestioned. Their preparation for Morocco's heat, cavalry and cunning was not. On the morning of August 4th, both armies faced each other across the Lucas River. The air smelled of powder and iron. Sebastian rode among his men, exhorting them. Thomas Stukely, the adventurer who had wired himself into this web of ambition, took a central command and would soon pay for it. The battle erupted, cannon and musket volleys, then a wild, bloody melee. The Moroccan cavalry swept from the wings. The Portuguese center faltered when Stukely fell killed, some say, by a cannonball, and the flanks began to give. Portugal's lines buckled. Men were cut down, others taken. The river that should have been a refuge turned into a trap. Many who tried to flee drowned in the high tide. Others surrendered. King Sebastian led a desperate charge into the heart of the enemy and vanished into the chaos. His body was never found. Abu Abdallah, the deposed sultan who had leaned on Portugal, attempted to flee and drowned in the river. Abd al-Malik, already ill, died either during the exertion or shortly after. Moroccan accounts say his death was concealed until after victory to keep the soldiers' will intact. This battlefield would be remembered as the Battle of the Three Kings because 3 crowns fell that day. The human cost was sudden and savage. Thousands dead, nobles wiped out, and 15,000 prisoners taken, carried off and sold into slavery, a humiliation for Lisbon. Portugal's chivalric elite lay broken. Only a handful escaped to the sea. Europe watched in disbelief. A small Atlantic kingdom had sent its king to Africa and received instead a catastrophe that would not merely wound pride, but topple a dynasty. With Sebastian gone, Portugal entered a dynastic abyss. The throne slipped first to Cardinal Henry, an old uncle. By 1580, the dynastic crisis birthed a new reality. Philip II of Spain claimed the Portuguese crown, forging the Iberian Union. For 60 years, Portugal's empire, her trade routes, her spice and sugar wealth would be drawn under Spanish oversight, and global balance would flicker. Morocco, for its part, consolidated. The Saadian dynasty emerged bloodied, but strengthened. Mahd al-Mansur would rise, and North Africa had proved, in a single stroke, that it could shape European fate. Why do we tell this story now? Because it punctures a myth that Europe's march was inevitable, that conquest was a one-way motion. At Alcácer Quibir, we see strategy, not accident. Moroccan leadership read the map better than Portugal read the land. They exploited local knowledge, built alliances, and used human memory as a weapon. The Moors who fought with the bitterness of exile were not pawns. They were motivated, skilled, and deadly. This was not a moment of African luck. It was a moment of African calculation. A kingdom chose to consolidate power, to make a gamble, and it paid off. The consequences rippled outward. Portugal's nobility was shattered, its global posture altered, and the European political chessboard changed course. Picture a Portuguese noble kneeling, armor caked in mud, hands raised to a desert sky. Picture Moroccan horsemen, faces lined by exile and hunger for home, gathering captives. Picture the families in Lisbon waiting for letters that would never come. These human shards are what history breaks into when massive events collide. Victory and loss, prayer and terror, a king who dreamed of glory, and a people who defended their country. As the smoke cleared on the Lucas riverbank, Europe had to reread itself. A small African battlefield had torn open the myth of unchallenged European supremacy. This was not the end of Africa's victories. It was a declaration. Strategy matters. Terrain matters. People's memory matters. Next episode, we travel east to a mountain kingdom where an army stood on a different kind of field, and where strategy turned a colonial invasion into a story of defiance and survival. This season will show you the times Africa did not merely resist, but outplayed the presumptions of empire.